Each go through multiple clinical trials with up to thousands of volunteers.
How do vaccines get approved?
Not all COVID vaccine versions will make it to the final stages of testing and approval. Produced vaccines that do not pass clinical trials will be destroyed. But for those that do pass, a team of medical experts will examine test results and possible side effects. If the vaccine is effective and safe, it gets approved and gets to you. Go to covidvaccinewa.org to learn more. A message from the state of Washington.
Join Rainier Avenue Radio from 5 to midnight for Sunday evening sound sessions. Jazz from the cabinets from Big Pocket.
That's right. It's time once again for Jazz from the Cabinets.
My day.
Sergio LaCour's Love Lines.
It's Sergio's Love Lines with Sergio LaCour. Go to the phone line. Tell her who we talking to.
Sage Prince, Just My Opinion.
This is Sage, and that's just about going to do it for the first half of Just My Opinion.
K-Fox Nightbeat with Nasty Ness Rodriguez.
It's the beat of the Fox. K-Fox Nightbeat, Nasty Ness.
You know what? You're going to listen from 5 to midnight. Just turn it on and don't stop. DJ Alibaba. The Underground Surround Sound Start Time with Paul
Thanks
Pearson.
for tuning in. My name is Paul Pearson.
Sunday evening
This is
sound
Start Time.
sessions on Rainier Avenue Radio. Trust me, you'll be listening the entire time from 5 to midnight. Sunday evening, your sound session on Rainier Avenue Radio.
Atlantic Street Center has been serving the children, youth, and families of the Seattle-King County area since 1910. We partner with families and communities to raise healthy, successful children and youth through services including counseling, early learning, youth development, domestic violence, and education support for school-aged children. Committed to serving the African-American community, Atlantic Street Center provides services and support for all marginalized people. Learn more at AtlanticStreetCenter.org.
This is Rainier Avenue Radio .world.
There is our theme song. Thank you, thank you. Hello, everyone. This is John Yasutake, your host on Seattle Here Now. Got a great show. I'm very honored to have these two guests. First up, I want to give an intro. February is also Black History Month, African American History Month, Carter G. Woodson, but it's also significant for the Japanese American community, the Japanese community, because of the fact that at the advent of World War II, under Executive Order 9066, which was basically signed into effect and came about on February 19th, 1942. This Saturday will be the 80th anniversary of that executive order. For those of you who don't know anything about it, I've invited the president of the Seattle chapter of the Japanese American Citizens League, JACL, Seattle, Stan Shikuma, who's got a very, I got a chance to get to know Stan, but also a little bit about his background. Educated, Stanford University, is involved in a lot of activism with respect to Asian history, Asian culture, but also civil rights. Stan has been involved in working with us on the coalition of the Martin Luther King Coalition. Support JACL has come out in support of affirmative action and the recalling, basically diminishing and taking down I-200. And so he, as the president of the Seattle chapter, he's representing an organization that's been around since 1929 and originally started, I believe, in California, but it's been around for quite a while. One of the older civil rights organizations, because JACL, Japanese American Citizens League, was also actively involved in civil rights. And so I want to invite Stan. Come on in, Stan. We've got a lot to cover in this short amount of time. Hey, looking good, Stan.
Hey, John.
You look
good to be here.
Yeah, you look so dignified, man. When I found out you went to Stanford, I said, oh, my gosh.
That was a long time ago.
Hey, no, not that long ago. But I did want to say Stan has been in the leadership position with Seattle chapter for what? Several years now. How many years have you been involved, been leading this organization?
Well, I joined the board in 2011.
Okay.
I've served as president for the last 2 years, and going into 2022, I'm now co-president with Kyle Kinoshita.
Okay.
So
Well,
hopefully,
you've
stepping
done
my way to.
you've done a decade. What did you do? You started when you was 25 years old, man? No, kidding.
No.
Well,
Well,
Stan,
actually, I did, because I got started with JACL during the redress movement in the
right.
early 80s. So
I forgot to mention that he was involved in the redress, which was reparations for Japanese Americans and Japanese who were incarcerated. Let's say, call it right, incarcerated from 1942 to 1945 because we were at war with Japan. And
correct.
the JACL, they kept the heat going, even though 120,000 Japanese and Japanese Americans, all West Coast, were Washington, Oregon, California, were interned and incarcerated in camps under Executive Order 9066, signed by President Roosevelt. And the enactment of it was the initial mobilization of the War Relocation Act, which was the Western Regional, and there was a number of different agencies involved. But you're originally from California, correct?
Yeah, well, I was born in Oregon because that's where my family ended up after the war. But the real family home was in Watsonville, California. And we moved back there when I was 2.
Okay, very good. So, Stan, I know you've been involved. Like I said, I had a chance to meet this past weekend John Yasutake, who did a wonderful short film talking about really alternate facts, which is basically lies about Executive Order 9066. And we all both know that the record shows that there was nothing documented with respect to Japanese or Japanese Americans being involved in spying or espionage. Is that correct? As far as we know, yes?
Yeah, there were never any convictions for sabotage, espionage, sedition. There were a lot of accusations thrown around at the time, but none of them, they investigated a lot of them, and none of them held any water.
Well, I know you were too young to be in camp. I was too young to be incarcerated, but your family members were. All of my family members were. Let me go back. Let's go back. Growing up, what were you told about the Japanese American? Now, this was 80,000 American citizens, Japanese descent, 80,000 U.S. citizens, coupled with 40,000 nationals, many of them their parents and other relatives. We're talking about 120,000 individuals, the majority of whom were American citizens, born here. What we call Nisei, second generation. I'm a Sansei, I'm third generation. So you go Ichi, Issei, Nisei, well, Nichi, so Sansei is third. But growing up, did you experience any information coming at you about the Japanese experience, the Japanese American experience, other than your family? Did you see it in school? Did you hear about it anywhere else? Okay.
No, we didn't get anything. I grew up I went to school largely in the 60s, and we didn't hear anything about it until the late 60s when Third World Strike started, and that was the beginning of Asian American Studies. And a few books like Richie Wagland's book came out, and Years of Infamy, and that's when we started to hear stuff. But through grade school and high school, nothing. Even from parents, even from the family, there was very little.
Yeah.
Just kind of these oblique references to, I haven't seen him since camp, or didn't they get married? Didn't they get married in camp?
Camp. That's what my mom and dad said, camp. And I said, oh my gosh, break out the marshmallows and build the fire and get the hot dog and roast. And then I read a book by Carrie McWilliams, about the internment. And this was when we had moved from Chicago to Seattle. And the only reason we were in Chicago is my mom is from California, Sacramento, and my dad is from Washington. The only reason they ended up in Chicago is because after the war, they were told, if you wanted to go anywhere, well, let you go. And they ended up in Chicago. However, camp, I couldn't believe what I was reading when I did that little paper, that there were 10 basic relocation centers, internment centers with barbed wire and machine guns and military personnel. And what's so funny is the military didn't want to be involved in the relocation. What I read was, hold it, that's taking too many resources away. We're getting ready to go to war here. Why are we doing this? And they argued against it, but other stronger voices prevailed. But you said camp, that just struck a nerve in me, because that's what we were told. It was kind of almost like we were ashamed, the fact that we were being incarcerated, because I guess when you get incarcerated, your presumption is that you did something wrong, right, Stan? Isn't that it?
Correct. Yeah. Everyone got locked up, got put behind barbed wires, lost, up to 4 years of their life.
Yeah.
And never a charge, never a trial, never a hearing.
Right.
For any of them.
Yeah. There were 3 cases. Yes. Fred Korematsu, and then Gordon Hirabayashi, who I had a chance to meet. And then it was, in Oregon. Yeah, right. And so those were the 3 individuals that get named. But the things that I think that I have also learned over the years, and I think we all know, we talk about the social political aspect of it, but there was a real economic impact, right? Your family suffered that. My family suffered that. We don't even know what those dollars are, because the Japanese, at least in Southern California, Imperial Valley, which was dirt, desert, rocks, they turned that into a multi-billion-dollar agribusiness area of 17 to 20,000 acres. That was lost. That was given up. And I mentioned Bellevue Square. Bellevue Square is built on land that was owned and operated by Japanese and Japanese Americans. And so, but getting back to you, in your travels as a representative and president, what do you see in terms of the education about this event happening now for our kids and in other generations of kids, especially kids of color? What are you seeing?
Yeah, well, it's mixed. So, when you and I were growing up, there wasn't anything in textbooks or school curriculums that you could find. And even at college, it was not easy to come across stuff until it got into the 70s.
Yep.
Today, there's at least 2 states and several cities that have mandated either ethnic studies or Asian American studies, and as part of that will teach about the camp experience. So that's positive.
Yes.
There's a lot of school curriculums that are available through things like Densho and Japanese American National Museum that are ready to go, that teachers can go to, that give teacher workshops, teacher trainings. JACL does teacher trainings as well. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot more material in video and books, even graphic novels coming out, like We Hereby Refuse, that Wing Luke locally just published last year. And so there's a lot more resources, a lot more access, especially on the internet. So you can Google it and you can find stuff. The downside is there's still a majority of states, vast majority of states, don't require that as part of the teaching. And it's still not very evident in textbooks, high school and middle school textbooks. Now we'll have like maybe a couple paragraphs, but they don't really go into depth, and you don't really understand the nature of it.
That's the sad thing about it too. Because when you think in terms of what the impact was, not just the psychological impact, to be told you had 2 weeks, a week or 2 weeks, pack 2 suitcases, that's what I heard, and get ready to go. You got to leave. You got to go. What? I mean, like I said, I'm fortunate, excuse me, that I didn't grow up under that, but my parents did and my cousins did. Many of them are older, and just like your family, and they were spread in. There were 10 relocation centers under the WRA, War Relocation Act Authority. And so you had Arizona, you had Gila River, and then you had Poston. Arkansas, believe it or not, Arkansas had Jerome and Rower. California had Manzanar and Tule Lake, which I will talk about again. You had Colorado, had Grenada, Idaho, Minidoka. Utah had Topaz, and Wyoming had Hart Mountain. Excuse me, folks. I'm going to mute. Sinuses. So, and Grenada was called Camp Amache. I mentioned Tule Lake because Tule Lake was the location center, the internment camp that was set aside for, I guess, what they considered the least patriotic Japanese, the ones that were under suspicion, or I don't know, And there's a story about a group of Japanese Americans, mostly Niseis, I think all Niseis, who said no to, you were asked, I think, 2 or 3 questions, about your loyalty, blah, 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 and to serve in the military, etc., fight for the country. And they said no, and that's the term no boys. Is that correct? I mean, fill in the blanks, because I'm not really.
Yeah, it's a there's a little more to it. So it's what the official title on the questionnaire was something about leave clearance.
Yeah.
So
okay.
To take a leave from camp, basically to be on parole,
right,
to get out of the barbed wire, and you had to move east. You couldn't stay on the West Coast.
Right.
And had about 30 questions. They graded it like, are you Buddhist? Are you Christian? +1 if you're Christian, -1 if you're Buddhist,
right.
And things like that. But the 2 out of about 30 questions, the 2 key ones were 27, are you willing to serve in the military in combat duty, wherever ordered? And 28 was, do you swear allegiance to the United States and forswear allegiance to the emperor and any other foreign government? And it wasn't just answering no. Like, if you said yes, no, or no, yes, you still were declared disloyal.
Right.
If you said, well, I can't really answer this, I'm going to leave those blank, you got declared disloyal.
Right.
If you answered yes, but only if my constitutional rights are restored, or yes, but only when my parents are released from this prison, that was equivalent to a no, and you got sent into segregation.
Man, that I mean, it's a no-win situation. And Tule Lake, I guess you could describe it as in high desert. I mean, you talk about, my parents told me, wind blowing sand, dust, everything inside these clapboard places that were covered with tarp. It's just horrible. Did you have any family members at Tule Lake?
Yeah, my mom's side of the family were living in Shelton, and folks in Western Washington, large in the countryside, got sent to Tule Lake.
Yeah, and then, well, again, a lot of the Washingtonians here and Oregonians went to Minidoka, of course, and those that were in California, Manzanar, etc., because I had cousins that were spread. But both sides of my family, my dad's side, mom's side, they went to Tule Lake, and so so moving forward, and you were involved in the reparations. And you were involved in a number of things, really, just very important things that you were doing. If you could give and this is, I'm putting you on the spot, but $20,000 for 4 years, basically 3 or 4 years, really, because you couldn't get back into the mainstream until about 1946, a year after the war ended in 45. What dollar value could you put on it? 20,000 seemed like a lot, but when you think about My grandfather ran a business right in the heart of the capital of the state of California, which would probably be worth millions, property wise. And the farmers that gave up their property all across the West, they gave that up, and their businesses, and they had to close the businesses. In your estimation, if I was to say, give me a dollar figure for reparations, what would you say? I mean, I'm putting you on the spot, but what would your your best guess be to give to each individual that was incarcerated for that part of their life? That would be fair.
Well, there's no way that it could be totally fair because, I mean, you can put a monetary value on property that you lost, or maybe even job opportunities that you lost, or education that you lost because of it. But there's no amount of money that you can actually put on the trauma that you experience because your father was taken away and you didn't see him for 2 years.
Right.
Or that you were kept behind barbed wire for 3 years.
And and many people, family members died while they were in the camp. There's a memorial that I saw that was for those that died. I mean, can you imagine you're at home and then all of a sudden you get rounded up by the military? You're looking at posters that say, Japanese, da 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 da. I mean, it's like a nightmare, and still you have to live through it, and yet you survive it. Here's what it says: instructions to all persons of Japanese ancestry. Blah blah blah. It's like what else can you go through? What else is there? I mean, your freedom is being taken away. You've been told that you are not, even though you were born and raised here, those of you who are, you are not one of us. And that is the issue that we talk about, the inveterate racism that was involved in that. It wasn't based on the fact that this country felt that it was going to be threatened, to some degree, but it was the issue of race, because Japanese are easy to spot. I mean, you had Germans and Italians out there. Mm-hmm. They weren't rounded up in not large numbers. We're talking about 120. Every Japanese and Japanese national, Japanese American along the West Coast was relocated. I mean, so you're saying, as you were saying, and I interrupted you, but you're saying can't put a dollar value on that, right?
Yeah, you can't put a dollar value on it. And and the $20,000 that they arrived at was always understood to be symbolic.
Yes.
It was loosely based on an estimate of how much property was lost. And
wow.
And the original figure was 25,000, but during the legislative process, it got negotiated down to 20,000.
Yeah, I know.
Because that would seem like an acceptable number, and that the government was willing to afford pay out.
So what can we do as we become enlightened individuals and we push to get this information, this piece of history put in? I mean, we're getting a backlash about slavery and all this. There's this movement afoot that says, critical race theory, which isn't even taught in the schools. But they're trying to say, hold it, we don't want to talk about slavery. We want to talk about genocide against the Indians. Hold it, that's our history. The history of the Japanese Americans and Japanese during World War II is U.S. history. It's our history. So what can we do? And you've heard this before. I'm going to ask you, what can we do to make sure that we tell the story, the truth, and what can we do to make sure it doesn't happen again to anybody? That's a loaded question, but hey, you can answer it because you're on top of it.
Yeah, so education is a key part. That we have a history that we need to learn about, and not just the rosy parts, not just the ones that are handpicked because it pleases certain groups.
Yeah.
There are certain facts about our history. Who was here when settlers arrived? It's not like it was an empty country then.
Right.
who was brought here against their will,
Yeah.
because slavery is not a voluntary issue, right?
Right.
And what did they do to build the economy?
Yeah.
And in the 1800s, who built the railroads? Well, It was largely British coming from the East Coast, and it was largely Chinese from the West Coast.
Yeah.
And then who built the agriculture in California and Oregon and Washington? They were all immigrants. And where I come from in Watsonville, the farming folks were people, Slavic folks from Yugoslavia area, Italians, Portuguese, Japanese, Filipino, Mexicans, and
all immigrants.
All immigrants. Our farm was saved by an Italian immigrant named Tony Tomasello. He immigrated about the same time as my grandfather, and my grandfather's first job was planting apple trees in his orchard.
Oh my gosh!
And so when it came out that we were going to be taken away, Tony Tomasello came and said, "Hey, I'll take care of your farm."
Oh man!
And a lot of people said that, but not very many people actually did it. They took it over, but they never gave it back. Tony Tomasello, he took care of it. And when our family came back, the farm was there, everything was in working order, the fields looked great, and we were able to resume because Tony Tomasello was an immigrant. I don't think he had citizenship. So if they treated Italians the same way as Japanese, he would have been taken away for sure.
For sure. Right. I know. That's, again, interesting. That is
but people need to know the history, and we can't be afraid of telling the truth.
Right. Yeah.
The
truth shall set you free, right, Stan?
Yeah.
Stan, because that is the thing. We have generations of young people who don't even know that this happened. I am fortunate that I was, and you're fortunate that we did at least get hip to what was going on when we were told this is camp. Okay, well, why do I see pictures of barbed wire? And what is that tower? It's not a water tower. It's a machine gun tower. Then the pieces start coming together. Then they finally said, we were basically arrested. And that's really what happened. You were incarcerated. So, and I think, I appreciate your viewpoint on that, and I appreciate your perception of it. But, like you say, education is the key. We have to start with that. We have to get people the facts, the truth about what really happened. There's no way you can compensate people for what they went through. My parents are gone, and I can't do anything but make sure that, like you say, educate the people that need to be educated and make sure that this doesn't happen again, whatever.
And I think the other important thing is to engage in any struggle where there's a question of civil rights.
Yes, very good.
And justice. So when we see people being tossed into prisons or detention centers for no good reason, and facing similar situations that we faced in the 40s, then we should just stand up and say, hey, this ain't right.
Right.
When there's a movement to get reparations for slavery, then we should be there saying, let's set up a commission. Let's study it. Let's figure out how that could work.
That makes sense. Very good. Yeah, I like that. I mean, because, we're all in it together. We're going to be we got to solve the problem. So we're going to have to do it together. And I think that's good. And like I said, I'm really proud of the work JACL has done over the years and to continue to do in your leadership. Thank you very much. You're a co-leader, you're a co-pres, so that's good. But nationally, JACL has come out. They're in support of affirmative action. They've come out speaking very strongly against Asian hate crimes that have been going on. And the thing is, they don't know if you're Japanese, Chinese, Vietnamese, Laotian, Cambodian. They look at you, you're Asian, they're going to attack you,
Racists don't check your DNA.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to share a very little known fact that this man is, I guess you could, I'll call you a master taiko drummer, because that was a fascinating piece that you're involved in taiko drumming, which is really cool. If you've ever been to hear taiko drum, I mean, it's cool. I just love the rhythm, the poly, all of that stuff is just really cool. My guest, Stan Shikuma, co-president of the Seattle chapter of the NAACP. We're talking about
JACL.
Yeah, I'm sorry. What was I thinking? JACL, Japanese American Citizens League, and the 80th anniversary of Executive Order 9066, which interned and incarcerated all the Japanese Americans and Japanese nationals along the West Coast during World War II. And this is, like I said, 80 years. Unbelievable. It seems like a long time, but every time I look around, it just seems like it's just yesterday that this happened. And there are parallels as to what's happening now, as you said. When you see people, immigrant status, being incarcerated and just thrown into, jail, massive rounding up of people. And God, it's insane.
Yeah.
Stan, I appreciate it. Yeah. And hey, check online. Go online. There are a number of chapters across the country. Seattle here, they can take memberships. Hey, donate, whatever. There's very good opportunities to support JACL and the work that they're doing. And continued success to you, Stan. Thank you very much for spending the time with me, and I appreciate it. And any last words?
Well, I want to thank you, John, for bringing up the subject and covering it and inviting me on this program. And I just urge everyone to learn your history, learn the actual history of this country, and work to make it better.
Good. Thank you very much. Hey, Seattle Here and Now with Stan Shikuma, co-president of the Seattle chapter, JACL. Folks, we're going to sign off and have a great rest of your week, Stan. Thank you very much. Keep up the good work, all right? Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
All righty. We will be back for part 2 with my very special guest, Booker Williams. We're going to talk about race again. Our show earlier, part 1, the Japanese internment was predicated on race. Social, political, but also economic, but based on race. We're going to talk to Booker Williams, a professional musician, a local guy, though, somebody I know. So we're going to talk about that. And Booker, if you're ready, let's come on in and let's have it.
This is Paul Pearson, host of Star Time. And when I'm not driving my sweet AMC Pacer through the car wash, I'm listening to Rainier Avenue Radio World. You missed a spot.
And welcome to our live studio audience for another exciting edition of Did You Know? And here we go with round 1. Did you know?
The COVID vaccine is free and easy to get. You don't need insurance or an appointment to get your vaccine. Vaccines are available at many locations near you.
And now we're going to double the value. Did you know?
The COVID-19 vaccine is always free of cost. You can visit pharmacies, community health centers, and other health providers in your neighborhood.
And now for the lightning round. Did you know?
The Delta variant of COVID is a mutation that has health experts worried because it's twice as contagious.
Then for our finale. Did you know?
The best way to protect yourself from the COVID Delta variant is to get fully vaccinated. Get your vaccine today.
Find out more at kingcounty.gov/vaccine. Did you know?
It rules apply when it gets this late. You know what I mean? It's like after hours.
Whatever gets you through the night, it's all right.
Hello, I'm an unpaid spokesman for DJ Sotovaci. I'd like to invite you to listen to his free-form music show. It's popular music the way it was never intended to be heard. Whatever gets you through the night, late nights, here on Rainier Avenue Radio World.
Whatever gets you through the night.
God is Rainier Avenue Radio World, your favorite community radio station. We're putting out all kind of inputs for you in your community. So come on and listen to us and tune us in. Get on our Facebook, Instagram, and all. As we're doing it right here for you in your community with Rainier Avenue Radio World. And God is an inspiration of gospel music. Also, we're doing a lot of different things in your community. We give out free food. We give out a lot of things in the community. We do a lot of shows. We do a lot of things on the sports part, and we want you to come on out and tune us in and come to the community, and we do a lot of things in your community. So make sure you go to our website, Rainier Avenue Radio World, and also go to the God Is website and look us up and see what we do in your community, something maybe you might like. So come on by and check us out from 11 to 2. Free food giveaway.
Would you like to see when your favorite Rainier Avenue Radio show comes on? Check out our show schedule, updated weekly at rainieravenuradio.world.
Right. Hey, we are back. Hey, there's a great event coming up on Friday, February 25th from 2 to 5 p.m. It's presented by the Northwest Black Business Coalition. Get Vaxxed Friday Fun Day at the Mercy Magnuson South, 7101 62nd Avenue Northeast. That's Magnuson Park. Get your vaccination or your booster. I said there's free food and gifts. So come on down. Walk-ins are welcome. Hey, for more information, go to online info at pnwbbc.com. That's info at pnwbbc.com. Hey, it's sponsored by the Washington State Department of Health. Get your vaccine, get your booster. Hey, come on down on the 25th Magnuson Park. That's at Mercy South at Magnuson Park. So come on down. Hey, my guest is my next guest. Very honored to have him. Busy young man, but a great talent. Somebody who's a local product. Someone who has, as they say, done his due diligence and done his work. Has been traveling internationally, playing, and I'm so honored to have him as my guest, but also have known him for many years as a friend. And I wanted to invite him to come and talk about the aspect that I'm continuing series that I'll be doing on race, but especially in the area of music, in sports, etc. So I want to honor him by honoring what he does to talk about the aspect of race and his lifelong profession as a musician. There is a relationship, folks. So Booker, come on in. Booker Williams. Thank you. Oh, there you are. Oh man, you're so cool. Ladies and gentlemen, and I have to say this, I have never heard anybody play a saxophone with the same, I guess you could say, dynamism, the same projection that I have heard him play, and it's just fascinating what he can do with an instrument. Believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, it's a fascinating piece. And at some point in time, we're going to get you on the air and bring, like I said, this continuing program. But Booker, thank you very much. I know you've been.
You're too kind. You're too kind, bro. You're too kind. You're too kind. Yeah.
Booker grew up here, but he's, like I said, transplanted in New York. Made some inroads, many inroads there. He traveled, and there's a Seattle connection here because my wife's second cousin is a guy named Sam Rivers. And those of you who know the jazz lexicon, Sam was one of the noted instrumentalists in jazz. Booker, you also played with Henry Thurgill's big band, and I know I think I saw a piece that he did travels in the big band did performances in Europe, correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
You was part of that, but growing up where you grew up, and I said I didn't want to spend a whole lot of. You didn't. You're very, very humble, man. But you grew up in West Seattle, per se,
right?
But I wanted to ask you. You're such a dynamic figure on the saxophone. Where did you get the inspiration when you first started out? to get into music, and especially the sax?
Once again, you're being too kind.
Hey,
You're really being too kind.
so if I was to ask you how you got started, what was your inspiration, or who was there someone your inspiration?
Right.
I know mom and dad, etc. But yeah.
Right. I believe that this happened in, let's see, I guess you call it middle school today.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to Denny Junior High School.
Okay.
So I believe it was the 7th grade. They give you an aptitude test to determine if you have the prowess to do music or art, whatever. So I took the aptitude test and I scored very high musically. So as far as the test, that test meant that you have music in you, and probably is a good idea to participate in school music, school bands, etc. So that's what I did.
Did you know then that you wanted to play the saxophone?
I had no clue. No clue.
That's good.
No clue.
Well, as a kid, same way. I once a week, the guy he's itinerant at Coleman, and he would come in, and you would go to the storage closet and pull out the music stand and play music for 1 hour. Mr. Manson, Lyle Manson. Yep. And but that's how they did music when I was in elementary. Then in junior high, or it was junior high then. Right. You could join a band. I was at Washington. You were at Denny.
Right.
But then what happened to me was I heard a guy named Sonny Rollins.
Get out of here.
I said, yeah, hold it. And then a lot of, and I'm sorry if I'm patronizing you, but sometimes I hear licks that you use that I heard Sonny use, but then I've also heard you have your own style. And like I said, we're going to get him on, and he's going to play later on. I mean, this is a series of shows. So, but we wanted to do this in honor of the fact this is African American Black History Month. Right. The element of jazz, or the element of music, and its relationship to history, but also the issue of race. And we had a discussion about race. But let's get into that. Let's dig into that one.
Right.
My position is this: no person of African American descent who's been involved in music in any of the last 150 years or 200 years has gotten full credit for their creative genius and their contribution not only to this country, but to the world, to the arts, to all of the things that are positive about human beings.
Right.
Do you agree? Am I overstating it? That race and racism has kept that out of the hands of the people who actually created this great music. And I'm talking about jazz, but not only jazz, but blues and gospel. Why?
I'll use that in the context of my own personal experience. Like you asked me the question about why or how I got into music and the saxophone.
Yeah.
And I had not a clue what I wanted to do when I passed the aptitude test in music, and they put you in a band class. So my influence on why I got the saxophone, even there were 2 magazines that were distributed amongst the Black community that I was aware of, Ebony and Sepia magazines. Those 2 magazines, Sepia doesn't exist anymore.
Right. Okay.
But at that time, my parents, my mother in particular, used to subscribe to Ebony and to Sepia. So one day I'm looking into the Sepia magazine, and there's this picture of a saxophonist, King Curtis.
Okay.
And he's got his saxophone bell. The way the angle of the camera cut his bell, the bell was huge. And he got this cat playing that saxophone. And that image is what impressed me so much. And I said, well, that's what I want to play.
Oh my God.
Just based on the image. And fortunately, having that exposure, even unbeknownst to me, King Curtis being a Black musician. So I was introduced to my blackness in some way right off the jump in terms of music, being exposed to that particular image. Because in my background, we grew up in West Seattle, where High Point part of West Seattle. But then we went to the schools. We moved out into West Seattle. We moved out onto Willow Street and went on Delridge Way. And the schools we went to, Frank B. Cooper School, etc., predominantly white.
Right.
So there was, which is not an unusual experience. Most of us have gone through this experience where you're the only one.
Yeah.
And so to me, that experience of being exposed to King Curtis, fortunately through the Sepia magazine, was Black history. That's Black history.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, that bell that you saw, I'm glad it wasn't a tuba. So I'm glad
I would have taken the tuba and I would have played out of the tuba.
I know. But again, I wanted to, and this may make you feel uncomfortable, but I know that when I researched the subject of what is music today, contemporary music, but going back over the years, back to the blues, gospel, jazz idiom, it's always the specter of appropriation by whites.
Right.
We talked about this. Fletcher Henderson, people like that, but people, Joe Garland, all these people who wrote music,
right?
Charlie Christian, people who are great musicians who died early, that never got the credit for it because of race. I mean, race.
They got the credit for it, but it was sabotaged or bootlegged. I mean, you can talk about. I mean, I'm thinking about people like Elvis Presley, Pat Boone. Now, many of these persons, they did cover tunes that were done by Black musicians, Black singers. And the only way the tunes would be played and to get a larger audience was to be performed by the white folks.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a reality. That's a reality today.
And yet and still, we know the history of it. We know what has developed by the creative genius. And let's be honest, this is the true American idiom. Jazz, blues and jazz and gospel come directly from persons of African descent.
The African experience, right?
And the African experience. They say, and I don't necessarily agree, but would we have gotten gospel, blues, and jazz had there not been slavery? I don't know.
Good question. I guess you can compare that to the diamond in the rough?
Right.
Where when you rub it, it becomes very abrasive, and at some point in time, you have a diamond that comes forth. So
right.
You certainly can contemplate the idea that slavery birthed that abrasion, which was beauty, which is the music.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Oppression, all that. Oh, yeah. I think that not me, other scholars, African-American scholars have said the same thing, that oppression begat this. And, and then noted psychiatrist and social commentator, Frantz Fanon said that too, about it. But yet and still, and I guess the travesty here, and I'm just going to say it, when I researched it, it's a predominantly white-run industry. In other words, whites, 37, 3 dozen, I looked at it and I tried to do some reckoning. 3 dozen individuals, all white, 4 women, run the music industry in this country. And I'm talking about the whole shebang, hip hop, rap, classical, all of that. And then I ask you, what can we do to offset that? What should we be doing as individuals who are consumers? Because we're buying into this. We're buying and supporting this disparity.
Right. I believe, I don't know if it's an answer to your question, but one of the challenges that I've discovered is that when we talk about our history and our strengths and our families and all this stuff, is we tend to neglect our own personal history. I mean, I was listening to your last segment with the about the internment camps and the Japanese American and all, and the challenge sometimes is that we neglect, and I'm saying this is something I've been addressing recently. We neglect our own family history. So for example, we can talk about Coltrane, Frederick Douglass, Cannonball Adderley, many of the greats, and they have stories told about these people, which is great. But what about John Yasutake's family tree? What about my family tree? So one of the things I've done so that the immediate family can have an appreciation of your history is I started what's called a video journal of myself, because I have relatives in the family that may not know anything about me and the history of what I've gone through musically that they might want to know about somewhere in the future.
Yeah.
So
that's
and in answer to your question, the question is so huge. I mean, it's so complicated. And it's not just in music, as you know. It's in sports. I mean, you look at the NBA. Look what's happening in the National Football League with this whole thing of how many coaches and managers, and it's the same thing, systemic problem across the board.
Right.
So whether it be in music, it's not unique to the music experience. It's in the sports, it's in the fashion industry, etc. And we state that we know these are issues. We know what the problems are. And we continue to talk about what the problem is and what the problems are with very little interest, or seemingly, on the how do you remedy that. And the conversation is always about the what. And part of me, my impression of part of the what is, let's break this term race. What is that? What is that? When we talk about racism, what does that really mean? I mean, in my opinion, there's only one race, which is the human race.
Right.
So if you're going to pursue the current definition of race, and I looked it up, and I happened to look up in the dictionary, there are sociologists and people who've decided somewhere along the line to break this stuff down, so that now today we very easily talk about race as if there are more than one race. Mongoloid, Caucasoid. So you get my point.
I got you.
So that's my challenge when it comes to talking about it, is to if we're going to really deal with the whole race thing and racism, let's really stop perpetuating the current or the common approach to race and racism. Because in my opinion, there's only one race, which is the human race. Now, there are certainly differences in indigenous, cultural, etc. But you and I, every human being that I know of and have ever known and have done research on, we all have two eyes, a nose, ears, mouth.
Right.
We bleed. So anyway, you get my point.
No, I do. But yet and still, I thought about it. Like I said, I personally don't support NFL because of the issues that you raised. Look at how many black coaches there are. Look at how many owners, general managers. The same way with basketball, professional basketball, etc. So moving along, you played around in the good old days with the R&B bands, and you know, I know you guys cut your teeth on that, but then you really moved on to what I call a different plane of consciousness when you talk about jazz. I mean,
Right.
it's like no other. Your platform, and like I said, I've had the great honor to hear you play.
Thank
And
you.
like I said, it's like amazing to me, and it's a very inspiring too. Why can't we sell this to our kids? Why are we so? I don't know. I look at our young people and I ask them about, what do you know about music? I mean, where the history of it is, and they think, well, they really don't know. We have never taught them, right?
Right.
Do we?
Right.
I mean,
Well,
when we talk, go ahead.
For example, talking about taught now,
Yeah.
the term education is a key.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I speak from my own experience. I remember at the University of Washington when they had they started recruiting all the black students, and they had this whole thing about black campuses, black courses on campus, and they brought all these black students from all over the United States, and they brought in black teachers. Now, I had been playing at that point R&B bands, like you said. I played, and my influences were King Curtis, Maceo Parker, and Junior Walker. And I got heavy into these cats and learning their licks. And at the University of Washington, there was a class called the History of Jazz taught by Byron Pope.
Right.
Now, I had never been exposed to jazz.
Mm-hmm.
And the term jazz to me had no meaning because I was super into R&B.
Yeah. Okay.
So I remember very well this day, the course with Byron Pope. This particular day, he was giving his students different assignments. So he says, this next assignment is going to involve doing research on all the black artists who died around the age of 40.
Whoa.
Which is quite a few.
Yes.
So when he made that assignment, made that declaration, for some reason, I figured he's going to pick me. So I started hiding. And you understand the class, you got about 80 to 100 people in the classroom. So when he misses, so I start to duck and I'm hiding. So, oh no, this cat's going to pick me. So he says, the brother back there hiding, I want you to do the assignment.
Oh my God.
And it was a blessing because that's when I got into Coltrane, Billie Holiday, all these folks who died around the age of 40.
Yeah.
And I got turned out on Coltrane because my introduction to him was Ohm.
Yeah, Ohm. All right. Yeah.
And from Ohm, I had to go back to learn about Bird and Lester Young, etc.
Yep.
So that's a good example of being exposed to the music, being exposed through education. But it was a big gamble to the school. The school had to do it because during that time you had the Vietnam War, and the riots and all this stuff. So they wanted to do the right thing.
Well, I understand, and my thought is this: you have played, and you are a master. To me, you're a master player.
Thank you.
Yet, I look at the commercial success of people like Kenny G,
right?
Dave Koz, people like that,
right?
And then I look at their racial ethnicity,
right?
They don't look like us.
No, well, it's once again, it's the nature of the beast.
Okay.
I mean, wherever there, in my opinion, wherever there happens to be an opportunity for black musicians, black artists, etc., to excel, the larger community is always looking for the great white hope. So that because that is more palatable to the public.
Yeah.
So if you have, I mean, once again, we use sports as an example. The Harlem Globetrotters, when they came out with their stuff, and it was an all-black group, and the tendency, people are afraid when you see a black folk gathering together. If you don't want to spook your public, you got to water it down a little bit. So you bring in some white folks. Bring in some white folks to help it out.
Yeah. Well,
and look at the NBA, same thing. Baseball, basketball, football.
That you make a very good point, because I know for a fact that you could not be an all-black band in this city, in this region, to play in some of the best clubs and the lounges, like at the Holiday, where there's big money and big crowds. You couldn't do it. You had to have a interracial, integrated group. Yeah, integrated. But hey, this is my very, very special guest, Booker Williams, a masterful artist. Oh, and he's a great teacher. And we're gonna. This is a continuing series, so you're gonna see him again. We're gonna talk about it. This is gonna be something we are going to be doing for the upcoming month. So we're gonna wrap it up. Booker, thanks you very much. Hey, remember, we got a vaccine thing coming up, Booker, on the 25th at Magnuson Park from 2 to 5. Free food, free vaccines. It's called, and it's presented by the Northwest Black Business Coalition. And you come on down on that Saturday, the 25th. But I love your glasses. I love your glasses. Okay, thank you very much. Up next is Metro Sports, and we got C King District Basketball on. Hey,
thank you, John.
Thank you very much.
Peace out. Peace out.
Hey, peace out. Take it easy. Stay tuned, folks. Must be there, Pat. Metro Sports Weekly coming on up.